This is Stare Down the Bull. I'm your host, Susan Hunt. Around here, we tackle the hard stuff. How to lead with clarity, leveraging AI, and turn strategy into real results. My guest today brings a powerful perspective on how to do exactly that. Let's dive in. Welcome to Stare Down the Bull. I'm your host, Susan Hunt. This is a place where we cut through the noise to uncover the truth, the essence, and the insight that can elevate your business, enrich your life, or simply provide some entertainment. Let's dive in. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you. Steve Chambers has been a pioneer in speech recognition, AI, and early robotics for the past 25 plus years. He's also a dear personal friend of mine. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Susan. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, Steve, you've had an incredible journey in growing Nuance from zero to a multi-billion-dollar company in 15 years. Most credit you with the success of Nuance over the years. What do you think was the most important lesson you took from that experience at Nuance?
The company really grew a lot through expansion in a couple ways. And what I got the most out of is how to optimize revenue and marketing organizations um, amidst a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Our chairman and CEO is super acquisitive, and the company grew significantly from the efforts of corp dev and the chairman and CEO. But I also had to learn how to get the sales forces aligned, get them operating together, get the marketing machine kind of unified. It was a lot of systems reconciliation, a lot of culture building, which at times felt like we were stitching together a loose quilt because there were a lot of companies. I mean, I think at its height, there were 10 to 15 acquisitions over a 2.5 year period. That's a lot of integration work. So that was a key takeaway. The degree to which I hadn't really respected and appreciated how culture eats strategy for lunch until that period of my career, when you saw certain companies with incredibly cohesive cultures that were really different from ours try to find their way and often stumble. And that was a real effort and focus of mine to try to rationalize the cultures and get people behind new and unified goals. That was probably the biggest takeaway. The other aspect of that is we were marketing technologies that created tremendous business impact, but also were press worthy. They were innovative. The first time people use a voice recognition system was an absolute aha for them. The big light bulb going off. It reminds you when I was at a video conferencing company and everyone said, oh my gosh, the Jetsons are finally here. It was kind of the realization of a long time goal. But they were also systems people love to hate. And people love to say, well, they don't work for me, even though we knew they were working for 90+% of Americans dialing into these companies. Yeah. So that was the other marketing big takeaway. How do you market transformational business outcomes and balance a consumer experience component when that experience was kind of on the bleeding edge and that people love to talk about, and maybe not in a glowing way, even if they were achieving success using the system. So it was an interesting dancing on the head of a pin at that time.
Yeah, and we also didn't really have a playbook back then. This is in the very early days of high-tech hyper growth in companies that nobody really understood yet. It hadn't been done by, 50 different companies in 2000, 2001. There was the dot-com bubble, but nobody really was growing companies to multi-billion-dollar companies at that time. There were only a few that actually did it. Today, it's kind of like there's a playbook that everybody understands and goes by, and venture capitalists expound what that is. But we didn't have that back then. We didn't even know that we were like pioneering this journey at the time. We were just doing our job.
There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. And we rode a lot of trends that in retrospect were the biggest trends in overall corporate business. Like, for example, the transition from selling platform software to becoming a SaaS company. Yes. That evolution happened under our feet as we were selling. And it's easy now. People say, oh, well, SaaS company, it's all about customer loyalty and CSAT and renewal rate. Those metrics didn't just pop out in 2012 all of a sudden. They were really evolutionary. And it was a very difficult transition to move to the addiction of the crack of drop-down revenue in a quarter as a quarterly driven company to that more steady state, focus on renewals, focus on sustainable customer satisfaction. It's just a totally different psychology. It sounds almost trite in 2025 to say it that way, but living through that transition, I completely agree with you. That was a big deal and a hard thing to accomplish.
Yeah, I
As we
remember.
were marketing transformational technologies, we were one of those companies that was growing organically and inorganically, marketing on an ROI basis. Here's the business impact our solutions can provide your company. But then, and that worked beautifully 2008, 2002, when the economies were really dipping and everyone was all about cost saving. But when the economies were better, we had to really pivot and transition our sales story to enhance customer experience, close the gap between you and your customer relationships, create meaningful dialogues over digital mediums in a way that was really, again, cyclical. It went up and down. So you're right. We traversed a lot of big business trends as we were growing the company at a rapid clip.
I remember that pain of transitioning from solutions work, reporting out revenue in a publicly traded company to the SaaS model. It was painful. It was really, really difficult, but somehow we did it. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. We always figured out a way to do it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of talented people.
Yeah, I always felt that around 2015, Nuance missed an important pivot into the AI arena, which they should have been leading the charge on that innovation. This was right around the time you moved into robotics. I moved on to Salesforce. Can you talk about your thinking during that time?
I had I had worked at Nuance, the company that Microsoft bought years later for around 51 billion. So it was a tremendous exit for the company, and that's really testimony to the value we all built in those formative years, I think. But to your point, I know why you left because we're personal friends. I left in 2014 because the monomodal interface, voice only, that we were selling, I started to feel was limiting. Those complaints consumers would have about voice services started to really feel profound. And we were moving into the mobile or multimodal, where you had a screen augmented with voice. We were moving into that realm. But I ended up reading about this concept called social robotics and met these two phenomenal women, one of whom runs the personal robotics lab at MIT still to this day. And she pioneered the field of social robotics. And I started to really feel that a missing component to truly fulfilling consumer experiences was available when you move from the digital only sphere into the personal sphere. So that idea of you're communicating not with a faceless automaton running on a server with a voice, but you're communicating maybe with a mechanical other, in this case, a social robot. And I was really intrigued by that because social robots don't look humanoid necessarily. They strive for emotional and psychosocial rapport. They strive to build relationship. And I know how weird that sounds. I know well, who would want a relationship with a mechanical other? But if you saw what I saw and read the research in that time period, how kids on the spectrum would interact with our robot in ways that shocked their parents, because all the social anxiety for a child on the spectrum of dealing with another human being drops when you have this adorable robot shape that looks like a
Yeah.
Pixar character and actually simulates making eye contact with you and tracking with you. So it was almost like encoding social DNA in a robot that was adorable and relatable, who called you by your name. If you walked into your kitchen, he'd recognize you and say, "Good morning, Susan." And nowadays, with ChatGPT and LLMs, advanced session state memory of consumer interactions, massive storage, hugely high capacity networks for low latency, nowadays we kind of take for granted that you go on in the last 2 years, you go on a chat GPT and it remembers a lot of the prior things you talked about.
Yeah.
It builds a very robust profile about you. We were doing that with rules-based technology back in the day with the robot. So he'd remember you as a distinct person from other people in your family, recognize you with a visual identity and voice program, and respond to you in ways that felt natural, that felt like cartoonish a little bit, kind of playful, but were appropriate. And he strived to build relationship with you like you're in my friendship. We met, we kind of vibed with each other, we worked with each other, we started to share more, you build shared experiences. and relationships grow that way. And that's what we tried to build in. So I left Nuance because I wanted to pursue a digital relationship that was very rich and delivered a lot more to consumers. And ultimately, it actually was placed in businesses too. So that was my motivation. What was yours?
I really felt that they were falling behind on AI innovation, and I saw all of these smart guys coming out of MIT and Stanford and Harvard starting up really clean AI companies that I thought were gonna be a big, big deal down the road. I was right. And I felt like we were missing the boat, like, we had all that data, that corpus of data that we had collected for many, many years, but we weren't focusing on that. We were kinda stuck in the same, technology with a lack of innovation. You know, your career is really incredible. You are literally on the bleeding edge. Your instincts are amazing. Like, you were in doing digital 25 years before COVID when it was finally accepted as a normal thing to use. You were doing speech and AI long before it was, popular, and then you turned and you went to robotics and did the same thing, so your instincts are phenomenal. I know you're still sitting on a few boards and, now speak occasionally on the merger of AI and robotics in certain verticals. Can you tell us what you're seeing now and believe that, the path might look like in the future for that combo?
First of all, I totally agree with you. There was a little bit of a story untold back then. And when we look retrospectively, we really could have told a giant story. It's easy now, knowing what AI has become, to kind of retrospectively position, but I agree with you there. Back when we were doing the robot company, I there was a 3 month period where the top 5 of 6 tech companies came to our offices and started to make overtures about buying the company. None of them did, but we got very close to 2 of them, which was super exciting. In the end, the reason why was really clear: timing. They felt the time for a robot in the home was 2024, 2025. And they felt the price point had to be 199 or 149. And those were independent conclusions, but shared across like 4 or 5 of those companies. I will say I did get an email from a guy. I still can't say which of the companies was it, but a buddy of mine ran research at one of the largest tech companies. He mistakenly sent me an email and panicked about this. And I understand why, because on this email was the CEO, CTO, and a whole corp dev, a whole bunch of people. And it was all about our robot company. And it must have had 70 email turns back and forth.
Oh my
But the big
god.
payoff at the end was, we're going to take our assistant and we're going to instantiate it into a form factor, just like these guys are doing. But the intersection of conversational speech, more advanced hardware for visual and display, we see that being a 2024, 2025 phenomenon. This was in 2016. And I say that because where do I see it going? The time is right now. I mean, just last week, I spoke at a conference about this topic: the intersection of AI and robotics and the needs it could fulfill. Let me give you an example. Everyone talks about, if you look at Japan, there's been so much press about the population size overall going from roughly 130 million to roughly 70 million and change, or 77, and that the demography is incredibly older. So
Yeah.
there's a crisis right now, and they're opening up the immigration floodgates to try to get their service economy well staffed and positioned to take care of their elderly citizens. There's a crisis right now in the ability to care, which is why they're so tech forward. Our robot, our social robot, one of its major aspects, its benefits, was keeping people company. It was a sense of security. It was a sense of relationship. It was companionship. That's why a technology like that and a robot in the home, it isn't just to vacuum your floor. Everyone says, can it pack the dishwasher? Can it do your laundry? A lot of people approach things like, what tasks can this do for me? But there's a giant population out there that says, what emotional needs might this satisfy for me? What sense of belonging might it deliver? It reminds me a little, and this is a dangerous analogy, it reminds me a little of the real promise of social networks. You get
Mhm.
the horror show of social networks and polarization and exploitation, digital manipulation, ad supported behaviors that just are driving everybody to mania. But then you get the positive or aspirational aspects of social, which were deeper connectedness, bringing you in touch with populations that you might never have had contact with in a very positive and inclusive way, making you feel as if you belong to something. It's another aspect of community, just like a local church or an Elks Club or whatever is an aspect of physical community around you. These robots in the home have that potential to connect us more to our world. As orthogonal as that sounds, technology connecting, and I realize it sounds a lot like the promise of social. I just saw it firsthand and I believe in it. So, what am I seeing? I'm seeing we're right on the lip of an explosion of introductions over the next 5 years where personal robotics hit an economic form factor, support conversational speech with advanced LLMs, support a depth of knowledge about you relationally, your likes, dislikes, how you like to talk, what information you're interested in, to become real, companions, best friends with you. And side note, it's really interesting. I raised a lot of money in Asia back then because in Asia, the view of a robot is in fairy tales and canonical literature is your best friend. It's like Baymax,
Mhm.
your buddy who's going to help you out. His purpose is to serve you. In the US, of course, we were asked, are you going to shoot lasers out of his eyes? Or is it Terminator? How, the valid questions about privacy and things like
Yeah.
that. So I think we're right on the edge of a consumer robot explosion where the convergence of AI, specifically LLM driven interactivity, and the technologies hitting an economic footprint, and it being championed by the largest tech companies in races with each other, which always creates an explosion of availability. I think that is our next 3 to 4 years. Separately, it's clear robots are increasingly fulfilling tasks uh, that humans can't or won't or don't want to do. The nuclear issue in Japan is very much being served and addressed by robots that can go into places of high radioactivity that people can't, for example.
Mhm.
There's a lot of press about, battle robots, which is a sad reality, but it's happening out there, robots for combat. And then there's just general task robots, robots for manufacturing that we know we've had for a while now, but they're getting smarter and better and can do more. And I know that carries a lot of what about people? What happens when robots do those things that people can do? I don't find that as new a problem as other people do. I understand it's a little more profound and concerning now, particularly since AI is getting so much press as a panacea or a potential agent of our destruction. But, we've had increasing automation over years, ATM, self checkout at a consumer level. And I'm hoping and hopeful that those positive aspects, relationship building, caring for the elderly, augmenting sectors of our society that are going to be significantly stressed based on demography and other climate change and things like that. I'm really hopeful that robotics and AI intersected can serve humanity in those areas.
Well, that's really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to chat a little bit about your personal journey during the last 10 years. In the midst of all this difficult work, you ended up getting cancer. You survived cancer, thank God. Can you share a little bit about your cancer journey? Because I think it's a part of you that you haven't shared too much with very many people, and it really has not changed you, but it's added a complete different layer to you than that we saw back in the 2000s.
I agree with that. I think it's an invisible minority, often the minority of survivors. And sometimes, and for years, I didn't want to talk about it because I thought it made me seem weaker and vulnerable, as if I were kind of less than on the other side of it. That sat in a huge, huge psyche of gratitude and appreciation. I mean, had I had the form of leukemia that I had in 2017, in like 2005 or six, I wouldn't be here. I realized how lucky the advancements of technology and medicine helped me personally see through that time. But for people out there who've, because so many, this has touched so many people's lives, severe cancers like this for me, it was shocking. I was so focused on wellness. I mean, I ate well. I did the
Yeah.
things that I thought would be basically adding up to a longer life and a life more physically active. But in 2017, I was in a board meeting, and my doctor, who's a friend of mine, and he's also got kind of a dark sense of humor. Uh, I saw him call me, and I had just had my annual physical like the Thursday before, and this was a Tuesday morning. And because he almost never calls me, I thought, oh, he's probably calling to tell me everything's okay. So I excused myself just to make sure it wasn't anything. And he said, get out of your office. They're waiting for you at Mass General in the emergency room. Find a med mask. Don't take public transportation. You have no white blood cells in your body. Now, I went for a physical. I didn't go because I felt awful or there was
Yeah.
some obvious symptom. I was a little tired, but as you know, I work really hard, and I just thought, oh, you're getting a little older. You're working harder. That's natural. So flash forward, it was 2 months in the hospital with a week in between two big chemotherapies, a stem cell transplant, and almost a year of recovery. So to answer your question at a high level, I'm incredibly lucky and grateful. It was the hardest thing. It was so physically difficult that in the middle of the second month, I wrote myself a note on the computer saying, if you ever get this again and have to go through this again, don't do it. And that's, I mean, people don't know this, that's not like me. And I said, don't do it because I don't think you can do this again. And that's how, that's how difficult it was. It was just debilitating. But there was a silver lining, and that silver lining was a completely different level. As trite as it sounds, because people talk about, oh, I have a new life. And I never understood that. When I heard a cancer survivor, I'd almost roll my eyes and look for Oprah Winfrey's couch when people would say, now I view things differently. Now I understand. I don't have a sense of a long life ahead. I don't have a belief that I can do something tomorrow. I don't have a belief that tomorrow is going to be 10, 15 years from now. I know what the statistics look like. So it changes the day to day, and it changes the relationship depth I want. And it's also changed a little bit some things that weren't serving me, I don't want around me as much now. It did change my career focus. So to answer your question about kind of being lucky enough to pick things like video conferencing, then XML over the internet, then voice recognition, then AI and robotics. The thing I picked before COVID from this illness, I always had a passion for education. And I said, I want to use the AI work that I've done and apply it to digital learning to advance scholastics, and particularly kids who needed to catch up, who were behind in their studies. So I ended up saying, well, you're a little old to work your way up the education ladder. So I went back to school for that. And the work of purposing AI to digital interactivity for really rich K-12 learning experiences to help kids accelerate their learning became really my thing and what I was motivated by. And interestingly, there's a lot of robots in that world trying to help kids because kids love robots. They love to play with robots, and now the robots are getting smarter and can help kids more. So, that was before COVID. So then COVID hit while I was in a master's program in innovation and technology. I had a course in connected learning during COVID that I'd signed up for. Halfway through the semester, we had to all go remotely. And it was at Harvard's Graduate School of Education, a place where you'd think people would have thought about this at a tremendous step. But that transition in a master's program from in-person to remote, when I did that personally and thought, oh my gosh, this was so hard. Can you imagine having a K-12, a K-5, an elementary school class that bounces to remote in a day? Teachers don't know what they're doing. So it was funny. I felt very much on the edge of something that, because of COVID, became a necessity, not a luxury, not a nice to have. It became you can't deliver education. You can't educate without solving this digital connection issue. And what happened is kind of well documented, but kids started to hate it. It wasn't engaging. The
Yeah.
experiences weren't good. The learning wasn't nearly as depthful because teaching is a relational discipline. It needs people with people. But technology can really help augment that. And that's kind of what became my passion. So the illness changed my sense of timing, changed my sense of purpose, changed my sense of gratitude, and also changed my sense of tolerance for things that maybe wasn't working in my life as much that I didn't want to pursue or follow
I
up with anymore.
just an observation as a friend, I also think that it radically changed the amount of stress you were willing to consume on a daily basis in business because you were like 24/7 at Nuance. You were always on. You were always around. You were always closing a quarter. I don't know even how many quarters we closed together and you closed subsequently of me leaving, but it was a lot, and that is a lot of stress. I see you living your life in a much different way than you used to with regards to that too. I do wanna s Yeah, I do wanna circle back to your Harvard experience because you kinda glossed over that. I mean, realistically, you decided to take the next easy step, which is go to Harvard to get your PhD in your late 50s. So, I would love you just to touch a little bit on what that experience is outside of the fact that you had to do it virtually. I know that you had a lot of fun doing this also and made some great friends, and it was a little bit rocky in the beginning because of some political things that were going on in the country at the time. So maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I was recovering after the second month in the hospital, you have to stay away from people and dogs, which we had two of them, and a lot of rules about your immune system as after you get a stem cell transplant. So I ended up taking a remote course. And we used to call these oh shit moments when my doctor would, OSMs, when my doctor would say something and I had no idea it was coming. And one of those things was, oh, by the way, one of the chemotherapies we gave you can impair your long term cognition. Well, what are you talking about? He said, so try not to watch TV, try to do puzzles, try to do things that engage you intellectually. And I looked like Lord Voldemort at the time. I was just exhausted and bald and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up doing a remote master's because I did a lot of school over the last 6 years. I did a remote master's in social psychology. It was during that period that I decided to go into education. I liked going back to school. It was interesting. I mean, the doctor literally ordered it. But then when I went to Harvard for education and technology, innovation and technology in education, I thought that's all I do. Let me do this master's. It was a full year, 12 months, contiguous month. And then when I was there, I saw this doctoral program and I didn't think I'd get in for a lot of reasons, namely because I was too old. I thought there aren't a lot of guys like me. The median age is 36 to 37. And I made some contacts from some incredibly special and wonderful and thoughtful professors. And ultimately, I got into that doctoral program, and it was a phenomenal experience, but very difficult. Ageism is a thing. And I forgot when I was in my 30s how I looked at people in their 50s. I didn't look at them disdainfully, but I didn't think about them. And that's kind of the thing that, when you're that age, you don't think of saying to someone that old, hey, how are you? What's your backstory? I mean, some do, but for the most part, not. So it was a very challenging. Academics were one thing that I felt good about. I mean, I had a history of doing well in school. I loved the experience. Very race centered because race is such a big issue in education. That was valuable. I know now everyone talks about woke, anti woke, but I'm just talking about the racial history in this country. I wasn't as aware of it. Now I feel much more grounded in its relevance. So, in a way, it was really powerful. That program in particular allowed you to take courses at the business school and at the Kennedy School. So I ended up taking courses that were incredibly fascinating and very different than I'd ever take. And I wrote my thesis on this area of AI in education. So it really all came together and worked really well to kind of set me up to be in this new space later in life, not working my way up in my 30s. I really used the educational experience as a proxy because I didn't have the years to spend in the space itself. Um, so yeah, but you're right. You're a friend of mine. I struggled with that at various points. It could be super challenging, not academically. I mean, kind of interactively, socially, all the things. It's not easy to go back late in life and do a program like that with a bunch of people 20, 25 years younger.
But if anyone can do it, it's you. You did. You did. So congratulations. You really had a remarkable career. You're known by many of our customers as one of the best executives that they've ever worked with. I've had many, many customers in Fortune 100 companies say that to me about you. So it is true. And our time here is up, but I really want to thank you so much for joining. And if you want to talk to Steve, we'll make sure that you have his information. You can hit him up on LinkedIn, on email. And this podcast, sorry, will be across all different platforms in a couple of days. So stay strong and stare down the bull. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Susan. Take care.
Bye now. Thank you for listening to Stare Down the Bull. If today's conversation sparked new ideas, share it with a colleague and keep the momentum going. The future belongs to leaders who act, so subscribe and join us again next week.